If the AI revolution in a technical sense stopped tomorrow, there would still be 10 years worth of new innovations and new work in the way in which we think about our role and our work. I think the key question here, and the key question that we've been looking at and trying to understand, is how is it being adopted in enterprises? How is it adopted in the way in which we do our work? We know that there have been considerable investments in artificial intelligence. Right? We know that about 40% of the growth in US GDP this year can be accounted for by the investments that artificial intelligence companies are making. We know that 80% of the growth in the share of US companies across the US share market this calendar year has been a function of artificial intelligence companies. So we know that there's a lot of investment. So the question is really, where's the kind of adoption across Australian occupations? And what we found was that there's a divide across different Australian occupations. We know that about 3 in 5 professional and technical workers are using artificial intelligence, compared to about them representing about 1 in 5 of all workers. We know that artificial intelligence is underrepresented amongst trades workers and people that work in community and service sectors, which sort of stands to reason given the nature of those particular types of technologies.
Does the pattern of usage in Australia reflect how adoption has taken place elsewhere, such as the United States?
Yeah, the pattern does reflect the way in which adoption is taking place across the United States and across many other kind of developed economies as well. One of the kind of challenges, I think, with the way in which we think about that adoption, in particular in Australia, is that about 2/3 of that adoption that is taking place amongst professional, technical, and finance workers, a large proportion of that is actually taking place unofficially or taking place in the shadows. Work in the shadows is itself a challenge because of the risks, but also it's a challenge because of the missed opportunities and the ways in which these particular types of work or these particular tools can be integrated into workflows of different businesses and enterprises.
Previously on this program, we've talked about surveys which have shown Australians to be late to embrace AI. Given what you've just told us, do you think that's changing? And are Australians in the workplace in some cases moving ahead of the companies and businesses which employ them?
So I think it's very clear that a lot of Australian workers, particularly in professional, technical and finance sectors, are using tools beyond the official policies of their particular companies. And I think that that's something that is a factor across the board. There's also a considerable amount of economic research across the world that shows that use of these tools in a personal capacity has kind of outshone their use in an enterprise capacity. But what's interesting is that we've seen a considerable build-up of Australian enterprises investing in these types of AI tools. About half of the ASX 200 last year made investments in this. That represents about, actually, the larger firms have an outsized weight in that. So about 3/4 of the market capitalization of the ASX. Those companies have made more investments in AI than, say, smaller companies. So I think what we're seeing is patterns emerging across not just occupations, but also across large and small companies, across different industry groups, and across different types of kind of work types where adoption rates are differing or diverging.
You've done some work for many of the AI platforms, including OpenAI and Microsoft. Is it clear yet whether this technology is having a measurable impact on productivity?
Well, what we know from company official statements, so from listed companies, ASX 200 company official statements, is that they're using it in a range of different ways. They're using it to mitigate their own business risks. They're using it to improve internal workflows and internal processes. They're using it to improve their kind of product offering and their external sort of positioning. They're also using it in many ways to kind of improve or change the kind of particular types of workflows. So we can see that there are a range of different ways in which companies are using these particular tools and the ways in which they're also deploying them. Some of them are deploying them through investing in different products. Some of them are doing it through acquiring smaller firms. And some of them are doing it through internal product development of their own, or capacity or capability development of their own.
And so, in terms of their impact on productivity, is it clear, say, in the United States, whether AI is bearing some fruit for all the investment that is taking place?
Well, one thing that is really interesting is there was research out last week that basically showed the impact. It looked at a different way to think about adoption, or it looked at a different way to think about the implementation of AI, and it looked at it across deliverables, or the nature of the types of activities that you would do with a particular focus on professional work. So think about it as the development of a research report, or in the context of communications, the development of a media release, or a sort of initial draft briefing to council. And what it found was that actually AI tools were improving their kind of first draft, in a sense, of these particular deliverables. It was a different way of looking at these particular questions, but you're starting to see improvements in the ways in which AI tools can do that type of sort of first draft work. We are seeing some improvements across in productivity in particular sectors, and we're seeing certain firms, sort of leap ahead in kind of deployment of particular AI technologies. But it isn't clear at the moment, what the effect will be on productivity, on the job market, on the labour market. I think we don't know that yet. And there's still a considerable amount of research to be done on that, even though at the moment it doesn't seem to be having a discernible impact.
And so, do you think that is a good news story for workers, or is it a note of caution for investors about whether the AI revolution is overhyped?
I think one thing that is clear is that there have been considerable developments in the way in which we think about the AI revolution, what effect it will have on work. If the AI revolution in a technical sense stopped tomorrow, there would still be 10 years worth of new innovations and new work in the way in which we think about our role in our work. I think the key question here, and the key question that we've been looking at and trying to understand, is how is it being adopted in enterprises? How is it adopted in the way in which we do our work? And I think that is a much more complex question for organizational design. It's a much more complex question for capability within particular workforces. It's a much more complicated question for the way in which the education system prepares tomorrow's workers for the way in which we think about our work. I think one of the things that's really important to kind of think about in that context is that workers will need to learn how to use these particular tools in a way in which it still communicates their kind of underlying responsibility or accountability for that work. And I think that's the piece that I think we're starting to see emerge as becoming more of an issue.
On that point, society is cataloguing the embarrassing fails from AI use at work with the latest Deloitte's AI error-filled report to government. What are the main takeaways from Deloitte's experience for business?
I think at the end of the day, AI will not be responsible for the work. There'll always be a human that is responsible and, more importantly, accountable for that work. A leader or a prime minister might get a great speechwriter to help them write that speech, but they are fundamentally accountable for that speech when it is delivered. And I think that, I speak as a kind of consultant. At the end of the day, I'm responsible for my work product. Now, I might use different tools to do that. I might use Microsoft Excel to help me build a model. But at the end of the day, the findings and the outputs, I'm responsible for that.
Amit Singh, good to speak to you.
Thank you.